Hello, Mammology. Welcome to our first online lecture. Hope you all are healthy and happy. So just a few announcements to get us started here. We are having ongoing a hypothesis paper discussion. You can find the link to that paper discussion on Blackboard in your lab. So if you scroll down, the last lab there is going to be a link to a annotation tool that allows you to interact with each other over the contents of a written item. In this case, it's a scientific paper on extra-pair mating in voles. So I would encourage you guys to go in there and take a look at that. In order to get full credit for the discussion, you need to make at least 5 comments somewhere in the text. I've asked a few questions. You can also ask questions, or you can answer other people's questions. And I would suggest actually that you check back more than once, because you might ask a question and then someone may respond to you. So I'm asking you guys to do that by the end of the day tomorrow. And as long as you make your 5 comments in there, you'll get your full credit for that discussion. The other announcement I have is exam number 2 will be on Thursday still. I will be posting the exam on Blackboard. It will be timed, but you will have up to an hour to complete the exam. You can take it at any time during the day on Thursday. So whenever works with your schedule is fine. And I'll send some more instructions on how to do the exam in a little bit. So those are my announcements. Again, email me if you have any issues. I am working, I'm around, so I'm here to help you guys figure out what's going on. All right, so our lecture for today is on social behavior in mammals. And this is going to be a chapter that I am going to put on the exam for Thursday, so make sure that you are looking at this as well. So a lot of mammals do live in social groups. It's actually something that's perhaps more common among mammals than among other taxa. If you think about like reptiles, for example, there are not very many social reptiles, but there are a fair number of social reptiles, although not all. I said reptiles. There are a fair number of social mammals, although not all mammals are social. So whenever you're thinking about animals living in groups, there are costs and benefits to group living. And so whenever you see this evolution of social living in mammals, you expect that the benefits of social living are outweighing the costs. So I'm going to ask you guys, actually, I'm going to put up a discussion link here, and I'm going to ask you guys to go on the discussion link and talk to each other and list all the costs that you can think of living in a group, and then also list all the benefits that you can think of living in a group. So try and think broadly and think of what kinds of costs and benefits might be associated with group living and how that might evolve. So one of the things that's really interesting about group living is that in a lot of cases, animals perform behaviors that are apparently altruistic. Now, an altruistic behavior is a behavior where an individual performs the behavior and a different individual benefits, and the behavior has some sort of cost. So the individual performs a behavior that's costly to it, and it benefits a different individual. Now, this was a big debate in evolution of behavior for a long time. Is how can these types of altruistic behaviors evolve? Because if you're looking at the fitness of individuals, if the behavior truly has a cost, then you would expect that individuals who do not perform the behavior, who only benefit from others performing the behavior, are going to have higher fitness than individuals who perform the behavior. So there has to be some other reason why that behavior occurs that explains why it evolves. Otherwise, you get a scenario like this cartoon here, where if all the lemmings are jumping into the ocean to reduce the population, the one lemming with the inner tube is going to have higher fitness than the rest of the lemmings, and inner tube wearing is going to become more common in the population. So you expect selfish individuals to spread throughout the population. So then the question becomes, when and how do selfless behaviors arise? And then this in the context of living socially, a lot of times when you're living socially, there are some individuals who, for example, give up reproductive attempts in order to live in the group. All right, so basically when you're looking at cooperation, you have to be thinking about how is this evolving, and why does cooperation have a higher inclusive fitness than cheating? Now we're talking about inclusive fitness here. Hopefully you guys remember this from a previous class, but you can look at any particular individual, and their fitness comes in two different like buckets. You have direct fitness, those are your actual offspring. And then you can have indirect fitness, which is offspring produced by individuals who share genes with you. So if you perform a behavior that allows a relative to breed, some of your genes, maybe that cooperative gene that allows you to perform this altruistic behavior, is also included in those offspring. And so it can spread through the population indirectly through the offspring of your relatives. All right, so some cooperation is clearly beneficial to all individuals involved. The individuals living or cooperating together immediately benefit from the behavior. So for example, herd behavior in a lot of prey animals is a cooperative behavior that benefits every individual in the herd immediately. So if you're living in a herd, you have more eyes that are looking out for potential predators. You are less likely in being a member of a group to get eaten than you are being isolated, and every member of the group gains that advantage. So that kind of protection from predators can be an immediate benefit to cooperation that you can see. Similarly, things like cooperative hunting can also immediately benefit all individuals. So these African wild dogs down here at the bottom could not take down a zebra on their own. But a zebra represents a very large meal. So if a pack of wild dogs can cooperatively take down a zebra, then all individuals in that pack benefit from that very large meal, which can be shared throughout the pack. So in some cases, it's pretty clear what the benefit of living in a group provides. There are other cases, though, where it can be somewhat less clear. So one way that you can have altruistic behavior is if the animals practice what's called reciprocal altruism. In reciprocal altruism, you do something nice for someone, and then later on, they do something nice for you. So if I buy my friend a cup of coffee, maybe someday in the future, they will buy me a cup of coffee. That is reciprocal altruism. It costs me money to buy the coffee, and I'm expecting that at some point in time, my friend will buy me a cup of coffee or do something else nice, right? Now, if you have a freeloader friend and you're always buying them coffee and they're not buying you any coffee in return, what are you going to do eventually? You're going to stop buying them coffee, right? So that's the reciprocal part, is the expectation that there is some sort of return of the behavior in the future. So primates are a classic example of this. Primates are actually really good at reciprocal altruism, including humans. We're really good at reciprocal altruism. A lot of our social behavior is based around reciprocal altruism. But in the case of non-human primates, things like grooming behavior often are reciprocal. So one individual will groom another, and then later that individual will return the favor and groom the other individual. And if they don't return the grooming, then the social bond between those individuals breaks down and they don't maintain that relationship. But what about some animals that maybe are a little bit less classically intelligent? This is a really great example in vampire bats. So if you are a vampire bat, where you get your food is that you fly out at night, you look for an ungulate. If you find like an ungulate, like a cow, you'll bite it and then you'll drink its blood. So if you find a cow, you have pretty much an unlimited food supply and you're very, very full and happy at our happy bat. If you fly around all night and you don't find a cow, you're going to be starving. And so what happens is that these bats go out, some of them successfully find an ungulate, some of them do not. When they return to the colony at night, the ones who were not successful in finding a blood meal that night will actually beg from other bats who have blood on their breath, basically. And the bats who've just fed on a blood meal, they've eaten so much that giving up a small amount of that blood meal is not actually going to be a very large cost for them. because they have so many calories that they have excess. So they'll regurgitate some of that blood for the individual who's begging for the blood. That will help that individual survive through the day until the next night when it has another opportunity to go look for a blood meal. So it's a really big benefit for the hungry individual and a very small cost for the individual who contributes the blood. Now, they've done experiments where they have prevented bats from reciprocating the blood meal. So if one day you provide blood to an individual who's begging, and at a future time you're going to approach that individual and expect a blood meal. And individuals who do not reciprocate, who do not provide a blood meal when a hungry individual approaches them, they get ostracized from the community. So there's a cost to being selfish, in that you don't get to remain part of the larger community, and that has its own costs. So it's a very interesting system where there actually is a consequence when the behavior is not reciprocated. And that's what you tend to see with reciprocal altruism, is that there has to be some cost for being selfish in order to maintain it in the population. Okay, there's also adaptive altruism. In adaptive altruism, there's some sort of fitness benefit to the behavior, but that benefit may not be immediately available. So it's an altruistic behavior that increases the individual's fitness in the long term. And that can be through a couple of different ways. You can increase potentially your indirect fitness by helping relatives who share your genes. Or sometimes there are altruistic behaviors that you perform at one point in time that then improves your fitness at another point in time. So for example, helping behavior is a really great example of this. So when individuals forego their own reproductive success and assist relatives in rearing young, that can increase their indirect fitness by increasing the number of relatives that are left to the next generation. And sometimes with that helping behavior as well, an inexperienced individual may actually gain reproductive experience through helping, which increases their own fitness in the future. So that's another possibility. All right, so here's an interesting behavior. This is a different behavior than helping individuals rear. Oh, wait, no, it didn't play. Hold on. Let's try that again. Okay, so in that behavior, the squirrels are sentineling. They're looking for potential predators. They live in a large social group, and when they see a predator, they alarm call. That alarm call is going to be somewhat costly. Well, sentineling is somewhat costly because you are not foraging. So you're standing up and you're looking around instead of eating food. And then when you actually perform that alarm call, that's also somewhat costly because it could potentially draw the attention of the predator to you and make it more likely that you are going to get eaten. So both of those are potential costs to that sentineling behavior. Now, these animals are living in these large social groups, so you can think about what kinds of predictions you can make about the who's going to perform that particular behavior. One of the ways you can figure out who you expect to be performing different behaviors is to use Hamilton's law. Hamilton's law basically states that Altruism is favored by natural selection when the benefits times the relatedness of the benefit outweighs the cost to the altruist. So let's say that you give up the opportunity to produce 2 offspring. All right, your offspring are related to you by about 50%. So you're giving up a cost of 2 times 50% is 1, right? And by giving up the opportunity to produce 2 offspring and staying to help your parents, maybe you help your parents produce 4 pups that they wouldn't have produced otherwise. If they're full sibling pups, each one of those pups are going to be related to you by 50%. That's how related you are to your full siblings. And there's 4 of them, so 4 times 50 is 2. So the benefit of helping is then greater than the cost of helping. So that's one way you can kind of look at it. Now these costs can be relatively small. So let's say that let's say with the Belding's ground squirrel, the cost of sentineling reduces your survival by like 2% or something, some small amount of cost. But by sentineling and providing that sentinel behavior, you improve the likelihood of survival of some relatives by a larger percent. Then you might expect that that behavior can evolve. So when we take a look at the actual ground squirrels, what we observe is that the individuals who perform the sentineling behavior, so if you look at this graph here, over on the left side of the graph is what you would predict if sentineling was evenly distributed across the different age classes. So in these societies, there's more females than males. So you would predict that more females would be sentineling because there are more females. So these are the predictions that you would make over here. This is the actual observed data. So what you can see is that females are sentineling much more than you would predict compared to males. So males sentinel much less than females. So if you actually go in and you look at the relationships in these colonies of squirrels, what you find is that you have, they tend to be large groups of related females and unrelated males. So a ground squirrel in a social group is likely to be surrounded by sisters and mothers and aunts and daughters that are all living together. And whenever they prevent someone in their colony from getting eaten, chances are pretty good that they prevented a relative from getting eaten. Whereas the males are related to fewer of the individuals in the colony. They're really only going to be related to their offspring and their offspring's offspring. And that's it. So there's not as many relationships there. And so the sentineling behavior has a greater benefit for females than males, and so females perform it more often than males do. That make sense? All right. Another reason why you might stay with your group, even though you're giving up a reproductive attempt, is that leaving your group can be extremely costly. So in meerkats, there's usually one dominant female, and she breeds, and all the other females in the group are suppressed by the dominant female. And in fact, the dominant female will often kill the pups. If another female has pups, the dominant female will often kill those pups if she can tell them apart from her own pups, and she will often evict pregnant females from the group. So if a subordinate female gets pregnant and the dominant female detects that, she will kick them out of the group. Now, if you get kicked out of the group, the probability that you will lose the pregnancy, that you will abort the pregnancy, is much, much higher. And the probability that you'll get pregnant again is very, very low because you're all by yourself and there's no one to knock you up, right? So there's actually a very, very large cost to getting thrown out of the group. Now, oftentimes these are daughters of the dominant female, so why would the dominant female want to prevent her own daughters from reproducing? Well, it actually turns out that resource availability has a really big impact on the fitness of the pups. So pups who have an abundance of resources when they're being reared have a much higher probability of breeding eventually than pups who have less resources. And when the other subordinate females within the group are not pregnant, are not reproducing themselves, they help to rear the dominant female's pups. They bring food, they actually will nurse the dominant female's pups, and that can greatly improve the fitness of that dominant female. So because of that, the dominant female is really resistant to those subordinate females breeding in the group. The subordinate females do get some indirect reproductive benefit for helping to feed, because when they do help to feed, they do improve the fitness of those young. So that is an indirect benefit to the helping individuals, and they get to remain in the group, which is avoiding a cost. So that's a reason why they would stay even though they don't get to reproduce. All right, one last little thing is a really interesting system. So social living is very common among mammals, but there is actually one species of mammal that has eusociality. And in eusociality, you have ranked castes of individuals that have specific roles. So the classic examples of eusociality are usually found in bees, where you have a queen bee who is the only individual in the hive who is reproducing. She produces worker bees and also her own queen offspring that eventually will disperse and start new colonies. But the worker offspring do not reproduce, and they actually just stay as workers. There is one example of eusociality in mammals. It is the naked mole rat. It's a little bit different from bees. In bees, the role of an individual is determined by what they're fed during development. In naked mole rats, you can actually move between castes, but it is very rare. So you have, in the naked mole rat, you have a queen. She's the breeding female. It's the largest female in the colony who is the queen. As long as she is large and strong, she will maintain that position. She produces all of these pups. She does nurse those pups, but they're also reared by the entire colony. She has 1 to 3 males who are her harem of males who she will mate with. Those males basically just lounge around. They're the largest males within the colony. And so she will mate with those males, and they don't have a lot of other tasks other than being the mate of the queen. And then the next size class down, the queen is the largest, the males are the harem of males are the second largest. Then you have a soldier class, which are a mix of both males and females that are defending the territory against other mole rats and potential predators. So these guys are going to be mostly patrolling the tunnels. These guys live exclusively underground. So they would patrol the tunnels looking for invading mole rats or potential predators and defending from them. And then you have workers, and the workers' only job is to dig new tunnels and find food and care for the queen and her pups. And these are the smallest mole rats in the group. Now, one of the reasons why they think this has evolved is that the main food source of naked mole rats are these subterranean tubers that are very, very large. And they're very few and far between. So you have to dig a lot of tunnels in order to find one of these tubers. Once you find a tuber, however, it's enough food to support the whole colony for an extended period of time. So you need a lot of individuals looking for the tubers, and then once one individual finds the tuber, then it can support the whole colony. And so that's why having a large group of individuals improves their probability of survival, because you're more likely to find those tubers when you have a large number of individuals in the colony. Within this group, though, you can have individuals move up. So if the queen were to die, then you would expect that the largest female from the soldier class would then become the queen in that colony. All right, that's, I think, all I have for sociality in mammals. If you have any questions, put them on the discussion board. I will be on there looking and answering any questions you may have, and hope you're all well. All right. Let's see if I can figure out how to get out of here.